Electiontruckung, a Deltarune fanfiction by Andrew Cunningham in Twitch chat. Hometown 2016, 1 week until the municipal election. A large monster carrying a poster board elbows his way through the doors of City Hall. The desk clerk lifts a quizzical finger in response. The intruder offers a helpless smile as he stumbles past in a rush, poster board banging off a framed photo of the town hanging on a nearby wall. He continued on down the dimly lit hallways, eyes fixed on the seldom-used door to the weird little basement meeting room at the far end. The church basement musk of liminal multipurpose rooms grows stronger with each step. As he pushes open the door, a wave of muttering breaks the silence. The room is filled with a smattering of hometown's adult residents, as well as any children unfortunate enough to have been dragged along. At the front of the space, sitting behind a flimsy folding table, was Mayor Holiday. Mayor Halloween Holiday, to be very, very specific. I assure you that I share the utmost concern about the increase in road traffic in our town, Mrs. Boom, she was saying. As a mother and fellow resident, I see it as a top priority to finally install traffic lights as soon as the funding becomes... Her eyes dart to the interloper in the back. Everyone else's follow. Greets Asgore.
Howdy, everyone. Pardon my interruption. I hope I'm not late.
The conference is almost over, Mr. Dreamer, Holiday says icily.
Well, yes, I can see how that might be an issue, but...
He stammers.
But I phoned last night and was assured that the mayoral conference would continue until each candidate had said their piece.
Continued silence in reply. He continued. He turned his poster board forward to face the crowd.
I've decided to run for mayor.
Asgore cracked open his fridge, wincing as the light lanced into the gloomy upstairs room. 1 pickle jar, 0 pickles. He shut the door with a sigh. This would be the 3rd time this week that the convenience store janitor, asking that convenience store janitor for expired goods. How much longer could he keep this up? He tramped downstairs to his shop front, kept spotlessly tidy in spite of its near-complete lack of use. His eyes scanned over his sumptuous display of white egret orchids, the only thing he had to spare. With only a moment of guilty hesitation, he crammed 3 into his mouth. Despite himself, he had to admit the taste was not altogether bad. As his thoughts wandered, a sudden spike of noise from behind him made him jump. His phone. It was ringing. Composing himself, he raised an eyebrow in puzzlement. A call at this hour? Had Alphys' washing machine exploded again, or was it something about Rudy? He grimaced and picked up the receiver. As it turned out, it was neither of those things. It was a voice he had never heard before. The only sound in the City Hall meeting room was Terry idly sucking back a Slurpee, but in a very cool and charismatic way. Asgore saw no obvious resolution to the stalemate, and simply began elbowing himself to the front of the crowd, muttering apologies under his breath. He finally reached the stage, and seeing no second table, pulled a folding chair from the back wall and sat with the poster board in his lap. The entire board was taken up by a picture of his smiling face and a smattering of poorly cut out JPEGs of flowers. The flowers are also smiling. He beamed with concussed affability.
I hope everyone is having a good time. Halloween is always such an eloquent speaker.
From the side of the crowd, something caught his eye. Toriel was seated in the front row, glittering at him with unwavering disappointment. The convenience store janitor was inexplicably seated next to her, resting his hand on her thigh. Asgore fought back the urge to retch and soldiered on.
It just seems, well, it seems to me that Mayor Holiday has been running for a very long time, and maybe Hometown is due for some fresh ideas. Mayor Holiday has worked so hard for our community. Don't you think she deserves a break? Out with the old and in with the new, as they say.
His smile quickly withered on the vine as silence began once again greeted his speech. You forgot the sans thigh bit? Yeah, I do every time. It's fun every time. Just because it's so early on and comes out of nowhere.
So, if I were to be elected mayor, what would you all like me to do? I have some ideas myself, of course, but I thought it might be...
Mr. Dreamer, Mayor Holiday cut in like an extremely sharp jello knife. What plans do you have to confront the opioid crisis facing our community?
The opioid crisis,
echoed Asgore numbly.
Well, let's see. It is my informed opinion as a...
He reflexively winced.
Former police chief, that opium is very harmful to the health. As mayor, I assure you that I would not consume any opium. I suppose I could also cut back on the number of poppies I grew in the flower shop.
Suddenly, a creaking noise from his left. Toriel stood up from her chair. Asgore, what are you doing? Before he could formulate a response, his ears caught a half-whispered remark from the janitor to her side.
Apparently not opium, Tori.
Toriel instantly, immediately, without the barest shadow of lead-up or escalation, began screeching with laughter. After an uncomfortable duration, a few members of the crowd began to sheepishly join in, at first out of sheer discomfort, then in response to how many other people were laughing, and finally out of some perverse tide of anti-humor that built from the whole situation. I'm gonna get rid of this Anne, it's been pissing me off. A booming voice rose over the din from Harold, who was Caddy and Caddy's dad for any unaware readers.
Hey Sams, are you running for mayor now too?
In the crowd's delirious state, this attempt at humor somehow made the laughter louder, or maybe it was just that he somehow pronounced Sans' name as Sams. The only one who wasn't laughing, Asgore noticed, with horror, was Toriel. An expression he had never seen before had crawled over her usually kindly features. A terrifying expression. Yes, Sans would also like to announce his candidacy for mayor. Toriel spoke over the din, her words somehow cutting through the ambient noise and bringing the room to a hush. Sans glanced up at her. She glanced down. His expression did not change. Her expression did not change, affirmatively. Sans shrugged and stood up.
Yep, okay, I'm running for mayor now. Sounds good.
The crowd erupts in applause, even for monster kids, somehow, through an ingenious and determined technique inexpressible through text. Nobody was quite sure why. Oh, Veritas is in chat. Cool. Halloween, with measured patience, rested a frontal appendage on her microphone, the resultant scratch of static drawing back the crowd's attention. This is certainly an unexpected direction for this conference, she said dryly. While it is still my firm belief that running unopposed as usual would provide the greatest measure of stability to this community, I admit that it might be a nice change of pace to have our municipal election reduced to a circus this year.
A circus sounds good to me, see? Everyone knows I'm already the biggest clown in town.
Clown around town, by popular demand.
I'm the biggest clown around town.
A chuckle from the crowd. Mayor Holiday glared. Asgore elected to simply stare into the mid-distance and hope that everyone had forgotten about his presence. On second thought, he realized that probably wasn't a good attitude in this context. We're gonna get to the new stuff eventually.
A campaign manager,
Asgore repeated hesitantly into his phone receiver. A pause.
No, you are right. The poster board was not as big of a hit as I had hoped.
A pause.
Yes, and the kerfuffle about the opioids.
A pause.
Yes, I see your point now. A manager may be of some help, but I'm afraid to say my funds are somewhat limited as of late.
A pause.
Alternative payment. I suppose that would do. How can I meet this fellow?
An unusually long pause. Asgore's eyebrows, slowly but adeptly, performed a festive jig. At length, he responded.
You are quite sure about this?
But the line was already dead. Sip. Yeah, the stream viewership's recovered pretty well after the power outage. Sans leaned against the store countertop, leafing through a car magazine disguised as a quantum physics textbook. From the entrance, a bell rang, a bell that happened to sound identical to the one from the bridge flower puzzle in the popular independent role-playing game Undertale. He swept his eyes upward, despite not having eyes, only to see the back half of Asgore Dreamer's body disappearing down the aisle at a brisk power walk. He considered saying hi, but decided against it. After a few minutes of muffled rummaging and the occasional audible Asgore reappeared from around the corner, obviously trying to pretend he had only just noticed Sans' presence.
Beautiful night, is it not, Sams? It's, not too dark, I guess, yeah?
Asgore smiled, and continued to smile. Seemingly not knowing what else to do, he abruptly pushed a handful of objects onto the counter. Sans looked them over. A single egg, and what appeared to be a sacrificial dagger.
Huh, good choice. The sacrificial daggers are going at half price today.
Asgore blushed.
Actually, about the price, hey, don't sweat it, big guy, I'll put it on my tab. On your, yes, very good then.
Asgore stammered. The conversatio was interrupted by the sound of a door slamming open in the back of the store. An orange blur sprinted out behind Asgore and crashed through the exit doors, belt tourniquet still visibly affixed to his arm.
Was that junkie just shooting up in your bathroom?
Asgore asked at length.
Huh, weird. I didn't know we had a bathroom.
Yes, but...
I don't know, man.
Sans winked.
Sounds like a problem for the store manager.
Okay, good progress. Toriel got up from her beloved living room chair, gently placing her copy of Power Broker by Robert Caro face down on her chairside table to hold her spot. She walked to the nearby fridge, and after glancing surreptitiously to either side, withdrew a can of whipped cream. She would of course be mortified if anyone saw her indulging behavior like this, but Chris seldom came downstairs after dark, and Sans wouldn't be off work until a knock at the door. Toriel's head involuntarily whipped toward the sound, but it was too late. The whipped cream was already in freefall. It splattered against her cheek with a wet Grabbing a tea towel with a free hand, she scurried toward the door, but in her haste to wipe the confection from her face, tripped on the beloved living room rug and sprawled gracelessly against the door. I hate the repetition here. There we go, good enough. When her eyes once again focused, they were met with the sight of Sans standing behind her, already having taken his shoes off. In his hand, a tin of whipped cream was poised conspicuously.
Hey, Tori, the manager let me off early tonight.
His eyes dart down toward the cream pie.
I had this whole bit planned, but looks like you've got it covered.
Toriel felt her expression melt into a stunned smile. At this moment, Chris appeared from the dark threshold of the kitchen like a ghost and stood mute, observing the tableau of unadulterated whimsy splayed out over their living room floor. Without comment, they paced toward Sans and gestured toward the whipped cream.
You, gonna eat that?
Nope.
Cool.
Chris plucked the tin from the skeleton's hand and turned to leave the room, industriously licking out the contents as they went. Still propped against the base of the door, Toriel craned her neck back and impulsively called out. Chris, dear, I think you should stay and talk for a while. I've been meaning to bring this up, but... Chris stopped the retreat, but did not turn around. Toriel saw that it was too late to stop now. Is it all right if Sans is your dad now? Silence. Sans made a desperate stab at de-escalation.
Or, you know, if dad is too much, I could just be the, whipped cream delivery man.
I'm gonna add an extra... There we go. As Toriel began to howl with laughter, Chris finally turned around. They retraced their steps back to the now mortified skeleton, and, with great care, pushed the remaining cream into his face.
Cringe,
Chris said, and walked back upstairs. Everyone's made that mistake before. Oh, I know, yeah. I'm down with the retcons. I've decided just to retcon shit, why not? The music timing. Yeah, we're hitting the emotional peak here. Asgore sat on his bedroom floor, trying to balance an egg on his toaster. The words of the incantation were now coming with greater confidence.
Not a circus clown who's more sick than funny, a lovable salesman who give me free money. You may ask who is next. You may ask who will be. Who will be the secret boss of adventure number 3?
He'd followed every instruction exactly. The circle of papers scrounged from the library recycling bin. The floppy disk loaded into the Samsung smart toaster he received as a wedding gift. The program downloaded from the mysterious website whose URL had been dictated to him letter by letter. The egg, though, he still wasn't quite sure about the egg. Oh well, no going back now. Making sure not to cease his chanting, Asgore raised the curved dagger over the toaster-egg hybrid. He placed the floppy disk into a slot and depressed the lever. Finally, focusing his will to become mayor into the blade, he brought the knife down, piercing the egg, the toaster, and the floppy disk in one powerful motion. For about 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then... Napstablook lay awake in bed, the first rays of morning sun filtering through the curtains and illuminating the stray motes of dust flitting through the air of their room. Their usual routine was to stare at the ceiling, feeling pure, all-consuming apathy for at least 30 minutes before phasing through the sheets and starting the day. This, Napstablook realized, could reasonably be called a waste of time, but to them it felt different, the small moment of total inaction serving as an implicit rebellion against the torrent of responsibilities that characterized their adult life. A span of haphazard meditation by which their mind could prepare itself for the storm to come. For at least these 30 fleeting minutes, they could call themselves well and truly.
Vote Asgore! Vote Asgore!
The noise flooded through the windows, the walls, through the ground itself. The single loudest sound Napstablook had ever heard, despite being the hometown police force's resident siren operator. The fleeting motes of dust became a small downpour, and the ceiling shuddered from the force of the vibration. That made me jump, it working as intended. Bleary-eyed, they drifted to the window and pulled back the drapes. The source of the noise was what appeared to be a decrepit pickup truck being driven through the town streets, its bed taken up by a hastily erected billboard covered in electoral propaganda. An array of speaker cones was bolted to the roof, repeating the same 15 seconds of audio in an endless loop. Hey.
Asgore! For the barrier is a vote!
Sure enough, Napstablook watched as a steady stream of similarly disturbed residents trickled from their homes to observe the ruckus. Harold crawled through the pet flap with his morning coffee and squinted at the van. Braddy jogged down the street in her pajamas, trying to get a better look. QC, the diner owner, appeared from around the corner, dragging a baseball bat behind her. As the crowd grew in density, the van was forced to stop in front of Napstablook's house. Through the windshield, they could make out a pale mass sitting behind the wheel, initially seeming to be Asgore, but that impression was quickly shattered when the figure turned its head forward and revealed a foot-long nose.
What's that gosh darn racket?
Bellowed Harold, advancing toward the truck. QC approached from the opposite side, cutting off its escape routes. The mysterious driver begins to visible panic. The mysterious driver begins to visibly panic and shifts gears several times between drive and reverse for seemingly no reason. Chat asks, is there context behind the Vote Asgore sound effect, or was it just made in preparation once I had the prompt? It's a reference to a video from a channel called DNSL. I'll just play the original clip so you know what I mean. At this point, why not?
A vote for walls is a vote for freedom. Vote Daniel. Vote Daniels. Daniels.
His is better than mine. I tried to recreate it, but his is better. So I made that before the stream, and then later integrated it into this sort of new slogan for Asgore by chat request. What did you miss since last stream? The entire stream. We're doing a read-through now, and so we're going to go through basically just the parts that we've written in the stream right now, so you're in luck if you want to know. Turn off that bloody noise, meow. A frogget croaks from the sidelines, jumping onto the vehicle's hood and visibly denting it. QC hits a taillight with her bat. Suddenly, the truck's tires squeal and it attempts a desperate U-turn, only to be cut off by a police car bursting through the back wall of Sans' convenience store, showering the crowd in rubble and frozen pizzas. Within a split second, Undyne has crawled from the wreckage. A moment later, Mayor Holiday emerges gracefully behind her.
Arr, drop your weapons now!
Undyne screams, somehow overpowering the truck's speaker system. QC sheepishly drops her baseball bat.
Not you! Arr, pick that back up!
The truck driver whips her head toward the new threat. Or not her head. The truck's driver whips their head toward the new threat, only to accidentally pierce their 14-inch nose through the window. After spending several seconds extracting it and loudly grunting in pain, they slowly crank the window down. What seems to be the... No problem here, officer. Is this a presidential campaign? Or sorry. This is a presidential campaign. Napstablook, who had merely been observing from their half-draped window this whole time, realized that they should probably go help since they were a police officer. Oh, they sighed and drifted through the wall, hoping everyone would still recognize them without their cap, which was inconveniently on the far side of the room and slightly too much of a bother to go and fetch first. They drifted through the truck's door behind the driver's back and now observed the entity clearly for the first time. It appeared to be a middle-aged human wearing a frayed black suit with all the visible skin caked in white makeup. Napstablook momentarily second-guessed the human part when taking into account the driver's 40-centimeter armor-piercing nose, but quickly stifled the thought for fear that it was somehow culturally insensitive. Excuse me, sir, I think you should maybe turn the volume down? The driver loosed a guttural scream and swung toward the ghost that was suddenly speaking over his shoulder, nose swishing harmlessly through Napstablook's ectoplasm. Spirits from beyond the grave! Napstablook suddenly found himself outside the truck again, as the driver gunned the engine and reversed into Harold's mailbox. The truck caught briefly on the post, but the driver scurried out the back with inhuman speed and devoured the mailbox whole to clear the path, before continuing his vehicular retreat in reverse, Undyne sprinting close behind. Faintly, Napstablook heard a, "God damn, which animal says oink, time to skedaddle, this popsicle stand," echo over the screech of burning rubber. As the commotion faded into the distance and the crowd was left standing in catatonic silence, all eyes gradually drifted toward a figure calmly walking down the sidewalk. A figure walking calmly down the sidewalk toward the corner, whistling washing on the Siegfried line.
Howdy, everyone, greeted Asgore affably. All up bright and early to attend the mayoral debate, I see.
Receiving no reply, he continued his stroll through the mob, and directly past Mayor Holliday, who stood with three limbs crossed amid the wreckage of Sans' store. "What?" she asked with barely contained venom. "Was that?"
I see you all met my campaign manager,
Asgore stated, as if that explained everything.
Well, do any of you feel more confident in my platform already? He's quite the wizard, this.
He chuckled. He quickly plodded his way out of sight, heading towards City Hall. From somewhere inside the gaping hole in the store, Sans could be heard musing.
Huh, I've been meaning to get a drive-thru installed.
T-Sip. Yes, chat, this was your idea. You did make this. The people of Hometown are startled by the noise, but they have daily traffic jams. Spamton's speaker system was at the volume of a jet engine. It was like breaking windows. It was illegally loud. It was powered by the car's drive shaft, like that one Mythbusters episode. The previous night, Asgore crouched, trembling, behind his overturned fridge, a steady stream of pickle juice trickling from the open door. The swarm of buzzing, long-nosed pixies was still churning over the remains of the toaster, having burst from its every orifice amid a pillar of suffocating black smoke several minutes prior. Asgore had no idea what the creatures were, but had the overwhelming instinctive sense that they would bite exposed flesh and or wallets, and so he dive-rolled behind his fridge in hopes of escaping their notice. Now, though, it seems the movements of the swarm were slowing. Gradually, from its center, he could make out the Umriss, footnote 1. Translator's note, Umriss is German for outline. Of a solid shape coalescing from the chaos. Without warning, a booming voice issued from the mass. "Press F1 to help! Oh God, please help!" The message repeated every 4 seconds at gradually increasing volume. Not knowing what else to do, Asgore crawled through the double doors to his back room. He clambered to his feet and began to scrounge through the piles of dusty boxes for his old Commodore keyboard, a remnant of his long-broken store computer. Ducking his head under the hanging pair of ice skates he couldn't remember buying, and skirting carefully around the piles of dust from Asriel's dead body, his hand at last brushed against the creaky plastic keys, and he sprinted back toward the site of the ritual with the peripheral in tow. The plea to press F1 was now looping several times per second at jet engine frequencies. Clutching his ears, Asgore desperately depressed the F1 key. With a clap of thunder that shook spiders from the rafters, the swarm shrank to a point like a collapsing star, and from the singularity appeared a pudgy human in a white turtleneck sweater and black vest. He fell several feet to the ground, landing on his amply sized ass cheeks and shaking the remaining spiders from the roof. Chance, hung up on something. I don't know what it could possibly be. There was a secondary thud as a purple spider monster in lace pantaloons impacted the floor and scuttled downstairs before Michelle Tchaikovsky's contract lawyers could notice her presence. The human, still sitting on the floor, swiveled his half-yard nose to and fro, surveying his surroundings. After a moment, he turned to face Asgore, nose vibrating like a doorstop from the sudden deceleration. Damn, bitch, you live like this? He seemed to levitate to his feet. Hochi daddy, these are some sweet digs. Thence filling the room with a screeching noise resembling laughter. Shoutouts to thence being a word, definitely. His nose drifts downward, carrying with it the rest of his face, to point at Asgore's knee, which had been scraped during his prior dive roll away from the toaster. Picked up a complimentary boo-boo from my reincarnation. No problemo! He leans in closer, 0.5 meter nose stabbing into the gash and causing Asgore to fall to his knees in pain, thus brought down to the man's eye level, and with his nose resting clammily, I guess that's a word, against his cheek, Asgore observed that his face was caked in a crayon-thick layer of white foundation that was already beginning to flake off his increasingly sweaty skin. I'm gonna change this. This has never made any sense. Icing thick. There we go. It was already beginning to flake off his increasingly sweaty skin, seemingly exposing yet more foundation underneath. His breath smelled like seawater. Without elaboration, the man produced a blue egg and pushed it slowly into Asgore's passively gaping mouth. The taste was, Asgore regained consciousness. The scrape on his knee had indeed been healed. The man was looming over him like a vulture. He jutted out a hand. Spamton X Spamton, he announced. Number one, rated milkman, 1996. He looked briefly uncertain. I mean campaign manager. Asgore blinked groggily and limply grasped Spamton's hand, trying to ignore the fact that his mouth tasted like blood, despite having no blood in his body and having no reason to know what it would taste like.
Howdy. So good to finally meet you, he croaked. My name is...
Mr. Creamer, Spamton shouted. Our mysterious benefactor told me all about you. Don't worry about one thing, you big Nubian dilf. When I'm run through with you, you'll be the biggest big shot in this Sukabliat town's ever seen. I don't know how to pronounce that. Asgore nodded vacantly.
That sounds quite nice, I suppose, but, about the,
I just gotta ask one thing, Spamton cut him off. Why do you do it? What kind of palm grease does it take to get a marketable plushie like you into politics? Spamton's face lit up, suddenly regaining a foothold on the proceedings.
Well, it's really quite simple. The nice man on the phone yesterday explained that if I only were to become mayor, I could designate my flower shop as a heritage property and appoint myself its publicly funded caretaker. That way I wouldn't have to worry about selling the flowers to pay rent, and could just give them out to the community whenever I wanted.
His expression darkened somewhat.
And I could also maybe afford to eat again.
I like a man with ambition, Mr. Dad Guy. You've got guts, just like all mammalian life.
Yes.
Asgore chuckled nervously. You're loving the Spamton? That's great. A lot of the brackets were crowdsourced. Was that the Asgore? Yeah. Oh, this time and only this time it will be spelled Asgore. Asgore chuckled nervously, struggling to rise from his back to a more dignified position from which to conduct political dealings.
Well, Mr. Spamton, I am excited to work with you. We should make an excellent team. You can be the brains and I can be the, mayor. For my platform, I was considering a focus on community togetherness and philanthropy. The school has been too underfunded of late to even buy enough chalk. I was thinking a significant diversion of funds into—
Holy heaven, that's boring, Spamton screamed. Shut your ass up, mutton chops. While I'm your agent, your soapbox is whatever I say it is. Asgore tried to hide the hurt expression creeping over his face.
Well, what might that be then?
Let me check, Spamton says, already scuttling downstairs and out the door. Just sit tight and hold on to your dignity. Scene change. A large monster carrying a poster board elbowed his way through the doors of City Hall. The desk clerk have him? I'm gonna fix that one. Gave him a completely nonplussed twitch of the finger, and Asgore offered his most jovial smile in return as he shuffled his way toward the meeting hall. He jaunted down the length of the hallway and pushed his way through the doors. He should be the first to arrive this morning, which left plenty of time to set up and collect his—
Hey,
Sans was sitting there with the eerie stillness Let me try a third time. Sans was there, sitting with eerie stillness behind one of the 3 extra cheap folding tables arrayed at the front of the room. The cord of a lapel mic trailed across the stage and terminated on his hoodie, despite the fact that a wireless PA system had been installed in the room last month. Asgore jumped, but quickly recovered.
Howdy there, Sams. You are, rather early, are you not?
Hey, don't worry, he'll give you a full refund.
Yes.
Asgore paced toward the stage.
So,
He uncharacteristically struggled to make conversation. Something about this janitor always managed to throw him off kilter.
how has this whole campaigning thing been treating you? I know for myself it has been quite the adjustment.
Maybe it's a little strange, but sometimes it's nice to have someone call you out for being lazy.
I suppose you are right about that.
Asgore mused while fumbling with his own lapel mic.
Back in my college days, I admit I was a bit of a slacker myself. I never dreamed I could have made it as far as chief of police, let alone mayor. But I suppose Toriel has a way of bringing out the best in.
He trailed off. You just arrived? What the heck is happening? It's hard to explain. You'll just have to, improvise here. Yep, I'm still doing the recap. You haven't missed the rating.
Someone who sincerely likes bad jokes has an integrity you can't say no to.
Asgore chuckled at that, despite himself.
Toriel and I had so many things in common, but I'm afraid to say our sense of humor was not one of them. It was something I never appreciated about her enough.
More for me.
Asgore bit his tongue, unsure how to respond to that. He instead busied himself for a time persuading his poster board to stand upright on the table. Eventually, he turned back to the skeleton, unable to contain the question at the tip of his tongue.
So, you and Toriel, you have been spending a lot of time together of late, have you not?
Weird, huh?
Yes, you could say that.
Asgore muttered, brows furrowing.
I suppose what I mean to say is, I was wondering if you two had, you know...
His throat begins to tighten with mounting horror at the words coming from his mouth. He tried to think of some way to recontextualize his meaning, but...
Wow, that's, really childish.
Asgore winced and felt blood rise in his cheeks. There it is! Asgore is confirmed to have and not have blood within the same few pages. Now he'd done it. He was once again hopelessly trapped in the machinations of his own choices. All he could hope for now is that the crowd would start filling in soon.
What's the holdup? Look, there's nothing to be afraid of.
As Sans paused, and Asgore sheepishly looked over.
I'll be frank with you. It's time you learned the truth.
What truth?
Asgore pressed, voice growing darker despite his best efforts.
I'm practically a hot dog tycoon now.
Asgore's grip on the table tightened.
I've decided it's not going to be your turn, ever. I'm just going to keep having my turn until you give up.
The skeleton's face remained as impassive as ever, not ever turning to make eye contact with his rival.
Take it from me, kid. Someday, you gotta learn when to quit.
I'd very much prefer it,
Asgore said, slowly, icy rage permeating every syllable.
if a good-for-nothing dope-head like yourself would stop calling me kid.
He flipped the table, words echoing around the auditorium. Even then, Sans didn't move. After what felt like an eternity, he responded,
Here comes the grub.
Asgore stood, frozen in place, hands still clenched from throwing the table. $2 from Irving IV, real quick. Asgore gained blood from eating the peepus. Canon. That's canon now. Perfect, thank you. Here comes the grub. He heard tendons in his neck creak as he turned to face the skeleton in total confusion.
Here comes the grub. I just baked 10 million pies. You want any? Make sure to brush your teeth before crossing the street, Frisk. As much as I like putting hot dogs on your head.
At this moment, Sans walked through the door in the back of the room.
Oh, hey.
He said, waddling toward the stage and carefully not acknowledging the table lodged somewhere in the back row of seats.
Looks like that thing's running a bit low on power, huh?
He quickly realized that no response was forthcoming. He gestured to the cardboard cutout of himself sitting beside Asgore.
Oh, has this thing been pestering you? Sorry about that. It's just something I got my bro to set up to help with the workload.
Sans turned the cutout around, exposing a mass of wiring behind it, and a cluster of knobs with labels like pun frequency, chutzpah, and sentience. There's also a bottle of ketchup for some reason, in present tense. He clumsily replaced its 2 AAA batteries.
Oh, no, not at all. I was just having some difficulty with unfolding my table,
Asgore replied.
Yeah, I get you. The hinges on those things are deadly.
A moment of tense silence.
So, I guess I'll be real with you here, since it's just the 2 of us and you seem like a good guy and all.
By all means,
Asgore replied warily.
I don't really care about winning this election. Tori's clearly got her own ideas about it, and I want to make her happy, I really do, but we both know I'm not cut out for politics.
He nodded toward the cardboard and winked. I don't deliver that properly.
But we both know I'm not cut out for politics. But you seem to have a real head on your shoulders. I don't know what made you decide to up and run against Holiday, but if you've got your reasons, I wish you luck.
The skeleton shrugged and began pacing back toward the door.
As for me, I've got a shift today. I'm just gonna let my bro use my slot to promote his new album. See ya.
The door clunked shut, leaving Asgore alone with his thoughts and a cardboard cutout sans homunculus that was gradually leaking ketchup. Here we go. The Super Bowl isn't actually on now, is it? Did that happen again? For all I know, the Super Bowl is on right now. People keep mentioning it in chat. Anyway. The buzz of the crowd reverberated in Halloween Holiday's ear as she stood over her pulpit. As predicted, the seabed fracking issue remained a sticking point with Hometown's aquatic demographic. Fortunately, also as predicted, Hometown aquatic demographic still consisted entirely of Onion-san. If the fracking regulations are loosened, my platform will of course provide refundable tax credits to any aquatic residents whose property values are affected. From the back 3 rows of seats, Onion-san waved a collection of tentacles forlornly. But, my home is more than property values, you hear? Miss Halloween, you're a big meanie, you hear? Halloween composed herself before responding. This was still within acceptable parameters. A big meanie I may be, Mix-san, but I'm a big meanie who understands this town needs economic stimulus and needs it fast, and allowing tax breaks for undersea fracking is, at this point in time, the single most promising avenue for accomplishing that. To preserve the integrity of this community, we all need to make sacrifices. As the words left her throat, one of her eyes flicked upward and locked with those of her junior campaign staffer, Nerdly, who was seated deep in shadow in the back row, wearing full radio comms gear and thunderously typing into a laptop. He nods once. She nailed it. But wait. Nerdly also flashed a finger sign. Damn it, she'd forgotten talking point 6. I am confident, she picked back up without any noticeable pause, that, in time, the benefits will trickle down to everyone, even our aquatic residents. Thunderous applause. The Q&A so far had been textbook. She allowed herself half-smile, hidden carefully behind a forelimb. And then from the left, a deep, fatherly voice.
do it.
Asgore voice hasn't booted up yet. I gotta get some tea in me. Hang on. White chat saying that I give them Canadian Eastern Time vibes. Not a region, a time zone. Like my disposition is that of a time zone and Canada. Very interesting. Halloween is Reagan confirmed. I actually have no idea where the trickle-down meme comes from. I think the first time I heard about it was in the context of like Ajit Pai and net neutrality, but I guess it was Reagan though.
Do any of you actually believe that?
The crowd's murmuring fizzled and died. All eyes turned to Asgore. He returned their gazes with a steely look of his own. This was nothing like the Asgore of yesterday's debate.
Economic stimulus this, trickle down that, fancy words, but what use does this community have for words? Hometown is not a collection of charts and property values to be optimized. It is a community of people, and it is for those people that I intend to speak.
Silence. The crowd was rapt. Asgore leaned closer to his mic.
I have heard the people of this town, Mayor Holiday, and it is not fracking they demand.
He paused for dramatic effect, locking eyes with Onion-san, who was now quietly weeping in the corner, and then with a deck of cue cards held above his pulpit.
What this town needs is a war on drugs.
Calloween felt the tissue above her facial eyes crease in spite of herself. This was nonsense. Was this really his takeaway from their first debate? She quickly calmed herself, though. There was no way his new platform had legs to stand on after just one day. Suddenly, from the shadows behind Asgore, a tall figure looms into the spotlight. Police Chief Undyne.
Yeah, I'm the Police Chief Undyne, and I endorse this message!
The mayor's pedipalp spasmed. What? Undyne had gone turncoat since yesterday? At first, there was no reaction from the room. The crowd seemed too dumbfounded to generate so much as an embarrassed cough. Then, slowly, a smattering of clapter. Then a bit more. Calloween glared at Nerdly, who looked to be engaged in an all-out wrestling match with his laptop. He looked up, expression grave, and made a frantic sawing gesture across his neck. This was getting out of hand. She needed to redirect the topic, and fast. Her mind raced through the talking points. Land value taxes, traffic bylaws, school supply funding. Finally, it dawned on her. Mr. Dreamer, if you'd consider all sound in the room was suddenly drowned in badly mixed hip-hop backing beat. A 6-foot subwoofer descended from the rafters on wires and landed behind the pulpit of the third candidate, Sans, who had not said or done anything this entire time. Mooks, footnote 2, and Toby Fox, footnote 3. Both those footnotes just say that all characters and events in the story are purely fictional. Any resemblance to individuals living or dead is coincidence. Mooks and Toby Fox were both sitting on the speaker in backwards baseball caps and jamming out. The door slammed open at the back of the room, and through it, a 9-foot-tall skeleton strutted in a turtleneck sweater and dark gray overcoat. Gold chains jangled from his appendages as he gesticulated wildly in a manner loosely correlated with the beat of the music. Anyone who wasn't here for last stream is going to be having a fun time now in chat. Was Irina not here? You seem pretty disturbed, Irina. Oh, also JD missed this. Yeah, this is going to be good.
Ha! You're going to love this!
Okay, this is the part where I tried to read the chat-generated rap that doesn't have consistent syllables and doesn't rhyme.
What about now? It's time to rock with the biggity back bumble. What about now? It's time to rock with
Alright,
the
let's go.
biggity back bumble.
Gaster coming at you, serious, delirious. Darkness to be mysterious, turtlenecks and bottlenecks appearing out the car sex, looking for some things very, very interesting. Darker. I meant it with a marker. The Sans cutout chimed in from the stage to punctuate the lyrics.
Bon appetit.
I'm the sound from the cloud, setting skeleton in a trance. See the clapping in the crowd, all the people speaking hands.
You've been busy, huh?
It's working. All these menial and material tasks got me rapping to mass. Beware the man who speaks in hands. Always in the top 5 for the rave die. My PhD won't deter me, no.
Isn't my brother cool?
The skeleton walked up the aisle, rhythmically helicoptering limbs, slapping several members of the crowd on his way. He finally arrived on stage and immediately climbed atop Sans' table. Under the spotlight, his bones was visibly beaded with sweat. His knees quaked. I'm a real Deus Ex Machina, rapping all over ya. Shout out to my brother here, Sans, be trying to run for president. Town's newest resident, yeah. The blight of the innocent made from cancerous candies. The fucking song ended. Don't cut me off, I was doing it.
What about now? It's time to rock with the biggity back bumble.
The blight of the innocent made from cancerous candy. The true carcinogens in Genesis. Sega Genesis, He trailed off. Look for my new album, Him, on Bandcamp, SoundCloud, and other online storefronts. Woo! Silence, except for the incredibly loud music. Yo, Him stands for Holland and Money. I'm the master of the sound, you disaster on the ground. If you mess with my clout, get ready to get blasted with my gaster blaster in your fucking snout. I'm not mid, I'm a kid of the bidding off my tongue. It's too hot from the traction, spitting, they fire out. I'm a lion, I'm a panther, call me gaster, call me faster. I'm a cheetah, not a cheetah. Adultery sucks. He flashed a golden crucifix from his wallet chain. He starts to do the Dougie at extreme speed. The table shudders underfoot. Gaster buster, pester, puster, disaster, master, classer, raster, clapper, hamster, amateur, chaster, dig off there, your mom, smasher. The table collapses, sending Gaster crashing to the stage in a tangle of angular limbs. Fuck, oh shit, it hurts, fuck, oh, fuck my arm, oh my arm, god, fuck my arm is broken, help, oh god, it hurts, oh. Okay. That was the Gaster bit. I hope you all liked it. Before anyone can so much as gasp, Asgore practically leapt to Gaster's side. His police training was still alive and well, obscured as it was under the years of dust and flower fertilizer. I'm gonna retcon this to pollen, because that line sucks. A split second later, Undyne was by his side. Unbelievably, she seemed to be waiting to receive his orders. He could work with this. He scanned over the skeleton's gangling wreckage. The issue was quickly identified.
Montigia fracture, he mumbled. Ulnar radius bifurcated. We need immediate reattachment.
Undyne nods explosively and sprints into the crowd. She knows exactly what to do. While waiting for her to return, Asgore bent over Gaster's sweat-drenched, heavily tattooed face. Mouth-to-mouth would be required. Footnote 5. This is definitely true, says Toby Fox. He immediately wrapped his lips around Gaster's weird, malformed jaw-mouth thing and began heaving air down his empty neck hole, producing a flute-like noise.
You can do better, right?
The Sans cutout chimed in. Asgore took this to heart and puffed with redoubled effort. At last, Undyne returned, holding a folding knife Asgore recognized as belonging to Chris. He reflexively looked up into the crowd. Chris was standing in the aisle looking thoroughly unimpressed.
Cringe.
Asgore smiled at them and returned back to the collapsed skeleton.
Ready?
He asked. Gaster wailed incoherently in return.
Oh well, Asgore said. Just think of it like a visit to the dentist.
Scene end. Mayor Holliday slithered across the rain-slicked hospital parking lot, beckoned by the taillights of her still-running 1995 Mercedes Cungadero. Her PR smile was still in the process of fading from her face. The day had not gone well. As she approached her car, its rear door swung open by Nerdly. She osmosed inside. Napstablik accelerated out of the lot. "What's the damage?" she asks Nerdly, staring straight ahead. Nerdly holds his laptop directly in front of her ampullae. Win likelihood was down to 75% from 99.9. "Unbelievable," she mutters. All she could do was be thankful that the idiot rapper hadn't gotten himself killed. The sympathy votes for Sans would have been disastrous. The current situation was hardly better, though. Not only had Sans' PR stunt and subsequent medical emergency catapulted his non-existent platform to the frontrunner candidate for the irony-poisoned disaffected youth demographic, but Asgore's heroic efforts in reattaching Gaster's arm through an on-site determination suture had positioned him as a viable, rough-and-tumble alternative to her own brand of calculated efficiency. His arm did still look a bit goopy when she dropped by to visit, though, and a cruel part of her wondered if Asgore's approval rating would sink again if it ended up falling off. "Nerdly," she said. "Who was that girl at the hospital who kept asking me questions? Was she with the press? I didn't recognize her from the usual suspects." Nerdly returned a puzzled look. At length, Napstablik piped up from the driver's seat. "That was your, daughter, I think. She told me she's been visiting Rudy after class." Calloween scowled. "I see. She looks older than I remember." As the car neared the gate of the holiday residence, Nerdly fidgeted nervously. He performed an intricate series of hand signals that indicated something along the lines of, "Well, what now, Miss Holliday?" The mayor steepled her suction cups. "We go to war."
Hey bro, I know I told you to break a leg before the show, but I don't think you really picked up what I was laying down.
What the fuck voice was I doing for Gaster? I'll go with that one person's headcanon. He's British now. "Sans, I'm in incredible pain. I would appreciate if you stopped making puns about it." Oh, that was more Australian. That was the worst British accent I've ever heard, actually. That was terrible. That really sucked. I apologize for that. I overestimated my ability to just do an English accent out the gate there. Yikes. Ow. Do New Zealand? Impossible. I don't know.
Sans, I'm in incredible pain. I would appreciate if you stopped making puns about it.
How's that? That's no accent that a human actually uses. That's my own accent that I made up just now. In it. Gaster lay prone on a hospital bed, legs sticking so far. This was pointed out, by the way. Outson tried to make fan art. Prone means you're on your stomach. I didn't know that it had a specific meaning. What I meant to say was supine, because it's very strange to picture Gaster lying prone. Just pronounce all the vowels wrong for New Zealand accent. That's every accent, though. That's just what accents are. "Keep it," says Outson. I don't like the mental image. It's weird looking. So far past the end of the bed that both of his Yeezy-clad feet rested comfortably on the floor. His arm was suspended in a sling from the ceiling and encased in a slowly dripping metal casting clamp. Chris's folding knife was still wedged into the gap. At the blurry edges of Gaster's field of view, he made out a bulky form edging forward with an enormous vase of roses. I alternate between vase and vase, by the way, that's how I pronounce that. He was accompanied by some sort of diminutive goblin whose nose extended at least 1.3 cubits. Asgore's face soon loomed into view overhead.
Please accept this small token of my condolences,
He rumbled, placing the flowers on the side table.
I am very sorry your performance ended under such circumstances. I was
He paused for a barely perceptible duration.
quite enjoying it.
Thank you, Mr. Dreamer,
Gaster replied weakly.
For the record, I find your platform...
He laboriously turned his head toward the camera and winked indulgently. Sans crouched into frame behind him and dabbed.
very, very interesting.
That is like fucking weirdo accent, dude. What is that? It's like oscillating between weirdo Cockney and like Aussie and Valley Girl. I don't even know how to describe it. What is that? I don't know. I don't know what the accent is. Sometimes you just like some shit comes out of your mouth and you're not sure what it is. Purple hamburger. But someone told me to say purple hamburger in the accent. Purple burglar alarm. Purple burglar alarm. Gaster then inexplicably faded out of existence with a funny sound effect. Sans seemed to regard this as normal, so Asgore followed his lead. He simply smiled awkwardly and ducked out of the room. In the hall, Spamton pivoted his head so that a 6.6 billion angstrom nose obstructed Asgore's path. He tugged on his tie.
I gotta hand it to you, Totes McGoats. I didn't have you, Paglin, as a meet the medic. Keep this up and they'll be eating out of your ass in no time.
As bad as Asgore felt for Gaster, he couldn't help but puff up a little at the comment. It had been a long time since anyone had praised him as a man of action.
That all seemed to go quite well, if I do say so myself,
Asgore mused.
except for, well, Gaster. What's next on the docket then, Mr. Campaign Manager?
Ask the pork sushi, Spamton said, gesturing down the hall to where Undyne was stomping toward them in full police chief regalia. Mr. Dreamer, sir! She began shouting to them while still several meters away. I've given the press statement as instructed! Asgore made a frantic double take between her and Spamton, unsure from whom to demand answers. Both of them just looked at him expectantly.
A press statement,
he eventually stammered out.
Whose instructions are you referring to?
The little weird guy, she answered, jabbing a thumb at Spamton. You know, just your talking points about how... fucking reading this whole monologue in Undyne voice is going to be a task. You know, just your talking points about how 98% of opiate-related deaths are of innocent civilians, that in 1839, opium overdose was the leading cause of premature death behind tuberculosis, and how 100% of all opioid products can be traced back to opioid dealers. Also, that thing about increasing the police budget by 400%. The school teacher lady doing an interview for her blog seemed to really like what we had to say. She said something about scheduling an interview where we meet in her apartment and watch The Simpsons. Undyne's voice faded from Asgore's awareness as he stared into the distance. As she continued to give her report, he felt himself all but pick Spamton up and smuggle him through the nearest door where they could talk in private.
Spamton, what did you do?
What did I do?
Spamton shouted, waving his 7.15 hand nose around wildly.
What did
This hot slab of puppet meat
do? I just won you a 25% market share of the hometown vote. This town has the drug crisis, and we have the
free and easy methodology to clean your PC now. People are saying I sound like JFK. All right. From Clone High. I don't really know what that is, but okay, cool. Very cool. Asgore steepled his hands over his snout.
But what happened to funding the schools, the community outreach? How do we fund a 400% increase to police spending and still oppose Holiday's fracking policies?
Spamton shrugged.
I don't know. Crime probably. I haven't been
seeing too far ahead.
Asgore spluttered. But you told me that Undyne joined our campaign because she respected my legacy as a police...
Look here, Mr. Barra Husbando. Undyne joined our campaign because you're a doer, not an asshole. It takes hit the gritty to make it in this business. Are you going to rile up the whole town just to leave them hanged? They believe in you, big boy.
Undyne believes in you! He paused darkly. Don't you want to be a...
Just wanted everyone to have hope.
Asgore glanced to and fro, unsure what exactly he was hoping to see. No one was here to bail him out with free pickles this time. He sighed. Spamton was right. This is what he had asked for. If the town was so desperate for a hero to solve the drug crisis, then surely any questionable actions required of that hero were justified. Yes, it made perfect sense when he thought of it like that. He felt tears prick the corners of his eyes.
Hey, big guy, if you two are looking for a room, maybe find one that isn't mine.
Asgore's head whipped around so fast that one of his horns dented the wall. Rudy had been lying in bed a few feet behind them this whole time. Noelle sat at his side, looking faintly horrified. Asgore blinked.
Oh, Howdy there, Rudy. Have you been well?
His affable smile took several seconds longer than usual to spread over his face. Rudy stared back with a raised eyebrow.
No, I'm in the hospital.
Yes, Asgore agreed. He held eye contact with Rudy for several seconds. He looked down at Spamton. Spamton shrugged. He looked back up at Rudy.
Well, it was nice seeing you. We'll be on our...
Wait just a second, Santa Claus, Spamton cut in, suddenly regaining his composure. You gonna pass up some hot, fresh, unsolicited voters? Before Asgore could react, Spamton had scurried to Rudy's bedside and was waving a pamphlet so rapidly that the bedridden monster's fur was visibly rippling in the breeze. Can I interest you in a vote against opium as a vote for freedom? For a limited time, all bribery, 50% off. Rudy just stared back at Asgore with an expression of deep confusion. Seeing no reaction, Spamton's attention snapped to Noelle, nose slapping flaccidly against her cheek. What about the Hochi Mama on the far side of the deathbed? Is that impending age of majority that I smell? All right, you're leaving now, Rudy said flatly.
Yes, we are.
Asgore smiled and carried Spamton out of the room by his nose. Hospital scene is clear, nice. How can voters be unsolicited? Well, until you solicit them, they're unsolicited. He was hiding in the hospital the whole time. The scene has funny dialogue. Thank either chat or me, I forget. The point of the stream is that chat writes the fic, theoretically also. Asgore sat at the bus stop outside the hospital. Undyne still hadn't managed to fish his truck back out of the lake since she'd chased Spamton off the road a day prior. His eyes followed a yellow and green striped figure walking across the lot and through the hospital doors. Why did I capitalize that? That's weird. A few moments later, it re-emerged and walked off holding a pocket knife. After a time, the sound of approaching footsteps broke him out of his reverie. Harry was like Sonic the Hedgehog, basically, right? How's it hanging, Asgore? Asgore looked toward the sound. His shoulders sagged. Jerry. He then did a double take and realized it was Terry, his shoulders unsagged.
Howdy, Terry. Today is a fine day, is it not?
He hesitated.
Apart from the medical emergency, I mean.
Ha! Terry laughed. That's really funny. I'm doing great, by the way. The Wi-Fi here totally doesn't suck.
Yes, Asgore replied, trying to give the impression that he knew what Wi-Fi was. Terry smiled back coolly. His smile did not reach his eyes.
Hey, so, I was thinking, Terry went on. You're chief of police for what? How many years? Like a bazillion.
Asgore nodded.
Yeah, so you were hanging out with, emergency services, right? That's cool. Really cool.
Terry trailed off.
Did you ever meet any firefighters while on the force, Asgore?
Asgore was slightly confused by the question, but he was happy to see the townsfolk take an interest in his career now that he was running for mayor. He had to make a good impression.
Well, no, not in town at least. Sometimes while out on call to the city, maybe, but...
Ha!
Terry cut him off.
Yeah, I wonder if that's because there's no fire department in town. Kind of a bummer, eh? Kind of a bummer how, just to pick a random example, Asgore, if your wife and kid's house were to catch fire in the night for some reason, it would take exactly 20 minutes for emergency services to arrive from the nearest fire hall. Bummer how they'd both
He took a long drag from his double gulp of blue raspberry Slurpee. Oops, what the fuck? Don't want to put emojis in.
They'd probably both burn to death, or at least lose everything they own, huh?
Asgore's face fell.
Hmm.
He seemed lost in thought. After a while, he responded.
It is a frightening thought. Thank you for sharing your concerns with me, Terry. There are many aspects of this town I aspire to improve as mayor. After hearing this, founding a volunteer fire service will be a top priority.
He beamed at Terry. Terry squinted back at him for a long moment, slowly raising his eyebrows.
So, you're picking up what I'm laying down, right, Asgore? About your kid dying in a fire? All that, yeah?
Asgore nodded.
Yes, your point is crystal clear.
Terry almost imperceptibly seemed relieved.
Cool. I knew you were a smart cookie. In that case, let's just say that I, as a hometown resident, I'm looking for a mayor who understands the importance of small businesses. And I mean, all small businesses. The urban entrepreneurs, the, street merchants, corner-to-corner salesmen, small-time cooks, poppy pickers, candymen, independent pharmaceutical ventures, narco-trafficants, narco-dealerid, die drunken dealer, something in Hebrew, something in Japanese. Drug dealers. Yeah, you can respect that, right, Asgore?
Asgore, who had stopped listening at poppy pickers, agreed enthusiastically.
As a matter of fact, I have been a small business owner myself for many years. I know firsthand the difficulties one faces in keeping such a venture afloat. Terry, you have my sincerest guarantee that I will do all in my power to defend the rights of hometown's local businesses.
Terry smiled. This time the skin around his eyes crinkled like tinfoil.
I knew you were a real one, Asgore. Remember, you won more than just my vote today.
With that, Terry turned around and walked back the way he'd come, baggy jeans swishing stylishly with each stride. After traveling a moderate distance, he began to laugh maniacally, in a very cool and charismatic way, though. The way I pronounce narco-trafficant, yeah. I don't know how... Yeah, pronouncing it correctly in Spanish is a task in itself. Then doing that while speaking like Sonic the Hedgehog meets the Chili's guy from the Donkey's VR chat video. It's a bit much. Man, Terry's so awesome, says chat. Hell yeah. Terry is an appearance that Irina did not expect. Well, you have chat to thank for that, the chaotic influence of the Twitch chat. I mean YouTube chat, I mean Twitch chat. Alright. Back to the holidays. Halloween Holiday struggled to pull more headphone cable from under the desk. She could barely see what she was doing in the dim blue light of the CRT monitor, and her tusks kept catching against the corner of the keyboard tray. Finally, she managed to coax a few more inches of cord from the dusty knot of cables against the wall, and she could sit up straight without the headset being pulled from her ear. Nerdly. Do you read me, Nerdly? She barked into the microphone. No response. Nerdly, she repeated at greater volume. Still no response. Then a knock from the door behind her. Halloween scowled. Enter. Noelle gingerly cracked her bedroom door open and put her head through the gap after a brief struggle with the antlers. It's, push to talk. Halloween whipped an eye around to meet hers. It's what? You, Noelle thought for a second. You have to hold the Z key down to speak. I see. Thank you, December, Halloween said and turned back around. She waited for the door to click behind her before continuing. Nerdly, do you read me, Nerdly? She repeated, now holding down Z. This time, the camera view from the monitor jolted upwards to reveal Nerdly's face. His wings were flapping visibly out of frame. He nods. Good, said Halloween. You'll have to bear with me, I'm stuck with a less than ideal setup. If we have to do this regularly, I'll invest in a mission control station that isn't my daughter's desktop. Nerdly makes a rapid series of hand signals into the lens, causing him to lurch dizzyingly to one side while not flapping. Varric is in position. Any sign of civilians? Instead of replying, Nerdly swung the camera back down, revealing an aerial view of hometown. The footage switched to infrared, showing no signs of life on Asgore Street. Proceed, said Halloween. As soon as Nerdly relayed her order, a white blip materialized from a manhole just past Asgore's house. Body heat. Varric was moving in. Asgore, she mused as the blip traversed the street, really couldn't have made himself any easier to assassinate if he tried. An out-of-work bum living on the edge of town, subsisting on God knew what and flower petals. She was half surprised he hadn't already died in his sleep after eating an expired pickle or something. But given his specific circumstances, she had something even better in mind. Who is Varric, says chat? Come on, you don't know Varric? Toby Fox's favorite guy. The camera swung up once more, a flurry of signs from Nerdly. Varric is ready to breach. He's confirmed possession of 5,000 cc's of clarified butter, awaiting your orders. Halloween's baleen clenched. That couldn't be right. Nerdly, I don't follow. Reconfirm possession of the substance. Varric has brought 20 buttercups worth of ranunculin toxin, correct? I repeat, reconfirm possession of substance. A pause, a series of signals. No, I'm pretty sure he said cups of... Nerdly's attention was suddenly jolted toward the ground. The camera swung back to reveal a smoking U-Haul van in the space where Varric's Umris, footnote 6, translator's note, despite everything, Umris is still German for outline, in the space where Varric's Umris used to occupy. Its hood was visibly dented even from this distance. A ways down the road, there was now a slowly expanding circle of heat. Halloween stared into the monitor without blinking until several of her eyes began to water. Numbly, she lifted a pincer to the Z key. Nerdly, she said woodenly. Come in, Nerdly. What is the status of Varric? The camera slowly pivoted back to Nerdly's face, a short gesture. Incapacitated, bleeding profusely, but still showing signs of Halloween and Nerdly flinched in unison as a gunshot reverberated through the town. Nerdly glanced back toward the street and turned back to the lens with a wince. He shook his head. Scratch that, he's super dead. Halloween remained silent for an uncomfortable duration. Finally, Nerdly heard the scratch of static as her mic came on. Nerdly, please reconfirm that Varric was not in possession of any toxic substance. Confirmed. Just 20 cups of butter. Understood, said Halloween with a sigh. Return to base. Mission is postponed. The line went dead. Nerdly, still somewhat in shock as he began to glide his way back to the Holiday estate, cast one last glance back toward Asgore Street, where a hunched white shape was pawing at Varric's neck for a pulse. A .45 Magnum gleamed from one of his hands. The view was so distracting that he collided directly with me as I delivered this narration from a diegetic vantage point hovering above the town on a jetpack. It kinda hurt. The raw emotion on this scene makes it so much funnier. I'm not sure what raw emotion you're talking to, but I'm glad it came through. Asgore's fingered, I'm having trouble reading now. Yikes. More tea. The music adds to it, yeah. Asgore's fingers drummed a cadence against the hood of Spamton's newly acquired U-Haul van. The smell of burning butter and blood from the radiator mingled with the fumes coming off the still wet paint from the campaign ad on the truck's side. I said that instinctively, so it's probably more natural. Big preposition chains are always kind of weird. He gave brief thanks to his police experience for the fact that he was not currently doubled over and dry heaving onto his lawn. That would really have been a terrible distraction from a situation that, all considered, demanded his full attention. He stared into Spamton's eyes. You shot him, he said flatly. Spamton's teeth chattered briefly, his eyes swiveled on independent axes like a cornered animal. Nuh-uh, he shouted. His nose immediately and visibly grew another .0005 furlongs. He suddenly glanced to the smoking piston. The smoking pistol still clutched in his hand. The sight of it appeared to terrify him. Just a split second after, though, his head spasmed back toward Asgore. His expression was completely composed. So many retcons, but it's for the best. His expression was now completely composed. Okay, maybe I introduced this pizza-haired gentleman to my big shot. Maybe I did rip that little fucker's body in half. Maybe I did shove his ass so far up his throat that when he craps he'll sing fucking Beethoven. So what? That's politics. Asgore's expression remained stony.
Enough rambling. Do you think this is funny? I don't know how I didn't see it before. You're completely insane.
With a disgusted shake of his head, Asgore turned from the carnage and began walking back toward his door.
I'm calling the police, he said. This cannot be allowed to go on.
After a few steps, Asgore heard a creaking noise from behind him. Panic surged in his chest as he pictured Spamton lifting the gun to his back. He whipped around, but instead of the gun barrel, he was met only with a smile so wide that it creased the skin of Spamton's cheeks like melted plastic. "Insane, huh?" he screamed without moving his lips. "We've been partners in crime for 3 days, and you're only just now noticing that I'm insane?" He took 3 waddling strides up to Asgore until the tip of his sextuple hot dog-length nose jabbed into the monster's chest. "Wow, that's rough, buddy. Sounds like a big problem for whoever hired me. But lucky for you, Mr. Fingers in his ass. This crazy... how do you pronounce that? This crazy poop fucker just spared your depressing unelected life." He gestured to the human body lying behind them. The blood pool was parted in the center by an iridescent lake of liquid butter. Asgore's eye twitched.
What are you talking about?
I've heard of this a lonely bounty hunter, before. The man's a criminal, I tell you, a criminal. #1 rated dark web assassin, 2008. Asgore's heart quickened. He watched transfixed as the pooling butter glistened under the light of the human's hovering yellow soul.
Cups of butter,
He mumbled to himself.
How could he have known?
He turned to face Spamton, fur now beaded with sweat.
I am severely lactose intolerant. There is no other explanation for someone to be carrying so much butter in the middle of the night. Spamton, I think you may be correct.
Spamton looked very briefly confused, but Asgore didn't notice. Yeah, of course. Listen up, Peppino Spaghetti. This ain't my first Calgary stampede. This can work for us. I just need your complete and utter submission. Asgore took a deep breath. His hands were shaking, but his mind was clear. Despite the horror of the moment and the fear of witnessing an attempt on his life, he felt something now that had been absent from his life ever since he started this campaign. No, not just then. It had been missing for a long, long time now, since he'd been driven from his own house like unwanted baggage. He exhaled. Things were finally simple again. His purpose was finally clear.
Tell me what to do, he said.
That's the right attitude, Fluffy Buns, Spamton said, pulling a plastic baggie of white powder from one distended nostril. You might make it in this business after all. Yeah, but Suburban Jungle ends just for the climax there. That's wonderful. This is the exact moment Asgore became Mr. Creamer. Hell yeah. Did it stop again? Let's go, and it's just quiet. It's emotional piano Suburban Jungle, maybe. A skeleton in black slippers and a clip-on tie interpolated down the sidewalk. Luckily, his dress slippers were Heelys, or else he'd already have worked up a sweat keeping pace with Toriel's lengthy strides. I wanted to fill this in with something. Whatever. It has to stay empty for now. I'm not doing it.
Hey, Tori,
Sans asked. What is it? She replied without breaking stride.
Remind me, can you throw out batteries?
Well, I think as long as you can fit them in the garbage can, she chuckled.
No, seriously, I can never remember. Are they recyclable, or do you need to throw them out? Or are they dangerous to throw out for some reason?
I think what you meant to ask, Sans, Toriel said, is may you throw out batteries? A moment passed. Toriel's gait slowed. Sans, she asked suddenly, voice subtly higher, do you mean to say that throwing out batteries is dangerous?
Well, I don't know, Tori. I was asking you.
Sans, I am serious. I did not realize that throwing out batteries could be hazardous. I have put them in the trash for years. I had no idea.
Look, there's no need to panic there. I was just...
Several yards behind them, following at a distance such that no one could tell they were associated, Chris surveyed the scenery for escape routes. Yeah, the music was helping. Church hadn't been the same since Alvin had started stocking Sunripe Peach Carrot Medley for the children's communion. They glanced briefly at the backs of the two figures ahead, just long enough to see the word suit scrawled on the back of Sans' hoodie in red marker. And, juice aside, they couldn't put up with these too much longer. As the group rounded the bend onto the town's main drag, Chris spied a commotion further down the street toward the lake. Their pulse quickened. Salvation? They raised a hand to their ear. Sans was now engrossed in a rambling account of a man who'd wandered into a store in the middle of the night to buy $50 worth of clarified butter. Toriel was laughing like a chimpanzee. This was their chance. Careful not to audibly change their gait, they deviated off course and began walking toward the distant crowd. Weird period placement. Soon, Sans and Toriel's laughter faded behind them. As the lakeside drew closer, they could make out the sound of Undyne's megaphone amplified... I can never say megaphone right, I say megaphone. Why? Of Undyne's megaphone amplified voice, booming through the trees. Their eyes soon met a scene of chaos. Half the town's population was packed into a murmuring circle around a ring of police tape, including Father Alvin, who was very much not preparing to deliver the morning sermon. On the shore to the far side of the crowd, Constable Napstablook was jotting down notes from a sobbing onion son, whose trauma blanket kept being tugged from their shoulders by the lapping water. At the center of the scene was Undyne, standing in front of an ominous black bag that slumped amorphously against the sandy ground. She was delivering some sort of address to the townsfolk through a highly redundant megaphone. God, I gotta read this again now.
The police were alerted to the sudden appearance of dismembered human limbs in the lake at 3:45 a.m. According to the witness reports, the limbs were tightly wrapped in chicken wire and coated in a thick layer of butter. Preliminary investigation indicates that the limbs correspond to the body of one Caucasian human male, between 30 and 40 years of age.
It's turning into Matt Pat Undyne.
Traces of opiates were found on the victim's clothing.
Before the echoes had even faded, a hand thrust skyward from the crowd. Chris recognized it even before its owner spoke.
Police Chief Undyne, Asgore's voice boomed over the crowd's din. What is the likelihood that this heinous killing of... what is the likelihood of this heinous killing being drug-related?
Mr. Dreamer, Undyne replied. You know as well as I do that it's too early in the investigation to responsibly make that call. But just between you and me, I'd say 1,000,000%!
The crowd erupted in nervous chatter. At the far edge of the commotion, Chris could make out the Mayor Holiday clenching a hoof before turning and receding into the crowd. Oh wait, not their side, only her. To her side, that one guy who looked like Red Birdley struggled to type into his neck-mounted laptop through a fit of intensifying sobs. After being reduced to limply bashing the keyboard with his fists, he suddenly doubled over and vomited on a nearby monster obscured by the crowd. Sucks to be them, Chris thought. About 15 seconds later, Chris felt a presence behind them. They turned and were met with the sight of Noelle Holiday, eyes visibly damp. A vomit-covered Christmas sweater dangled limply from her hand. Chris nodded tacitly. Noelle said nothing, but seemed content to simply stand there for the time being. Eventually, Chris ventured a jab of his thumb toward Nerdly, who was now curled in the fetal position and being occasionally tripped over by Jerry.
That guy sucks,
they said. Noelle smiled weakly. Which one? Chris slowly grinned.
Yes.
Without either of the pair explicitly deciding to move, they mutually began to drift out of the crime scene's orbit and paced through the deserted streets of hometown. While passing QC's diner, they could faintly make out a nasally voice from inside ranting about the Founding Fathers, but it was too muffled to be sure. Eventually, Noelle broke the silence. So, do you think your dad can win? She seemed to realize the implications of the question the instant it left her mouth, because she gave Chris no time to respond before specifying. I mean, you know, your real dad. She seemed to realize the implications of the question the instant it left her mouth, because she gave Chris no time to respond before specifying. I mean, you know, Asgore, she finished dismally. Chris didn't seem bothered. They shrugged.
Worried your mom's gonna lose?
Noelle giggled faintly. No, not really. Actually, it might be kind of nice. She might be home a bit more often, I guess. She trailed off. On the far side of the road, a small white dog captured their attention for a few moments by doing a kickflip. You know, Chris, Noelle said absent-mindedly, seeing how everyone's acted the last few days makes me think sometimes that we'd be better off if the mayor just was that little dog. At least then everyone wouldn't have to fight about it. Chris looked thoughtful for a second, their gaze lingering on the dog, who was now busy driving donuts in their Fisher-Price tough trike.
So,
they said.
Like someone who doesn't care about winning, and would just do nothing all day?
Noelle nodded. Chris stared into the distance, a microscopic smile slinking across their lips.
I might know a guy.
Noelle slowed to a stop, looking confused. Who? She asked. Suddenly, a sound approaching from the distance.
Yeah, you can always trust my bro to salvage a boring church service. That guy's a pontification machine.
He certainly was an eloquent speaker, but I am unsure what he was getting at by bringing up that Jesus fellow so often. Is he from a different denomination?
I don't know, you'd have to ask him.
Anyone who summons bread is cool by me, though. I know all about loafing around.
Even from down the street, Toriel's laughter beat against Chris's eardrums like the whipping of a rabid hyena. They turned back to Noelle and saw that she was smirking too. A large monster in a police uniform elbowed her way through the doors of City Hall. She kept them open. After her came a disheveled human with a 0.012 football-filled long nose, lugging a teleprompter, and then Asgore Dreamer. His bulky frame was clad in the black power suit that filled the entire doorframe. The desk clerk said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Asgore's entourage marched down the hall into the conference room. The crowd hushed at the sight of them. Halloween stared Asgore down as he mounted the stage. He stared back. Turning to face the crowd, he stood with his hands clasped and head bowed, the glaring spotlights pooling his eyes in shadow. Silence. No one in the room dared move. As the tension became unbearable, footnote 8, to the point where, should the mayoral debate have been taking place in the Dark World, Mayor Holiday would likely have accumulated enough TP to cast Taxgrave. There at last came a sound from the PA system. Halloween was reaching for her mic. In an instant, Asgore erupted with motion. He thrust his arm to the side with enough force to rock the stage. He plunged his hand into his lapel. A split second later, he drew at a microphone so ferociously that the entire suit burst into tatters and fell from his body. Beneath it was a second, flame-red suit, layered under a flak vest, its entire surface carpeted with corporate logos. He held the microphone outstretched for a dramatic moment, then slowly brought it to his mouth.
Citizens of Hometown,
He announced.
He
trailed off, and then spiked the microphone through his entire podium, shattering it like styrofoam. The crowd gasped as they were showered by splinters.
are at war,
He finished. Stunned silence followed, and was only broken when Jerry called from the back row. Hey, can you repeat that? It's kind of hard to hear you without the mic. Before his sentence could finish, Spamton Naruto ran across the stage and handed Asgore a new mic.
I said, Asgore thundered, we are at war.
The crowd now murmured fervently. Mayor Holiday tried to cut in. And I suppose this war will be sponsored by Raid Shadow Crystals, she said dryly, eyeing his suit. Spamton, however, was already setting up a teleprompter in front of the stage. If Asgore heard her, he gave no indication.
My fellow monsters, he orated, the ground at our feet has been stained with blood. A heinous act of violence has been committed on our very doorstep, and I promise you this, if we do not act now, more will soon follow. The time for civil discussion and petty maneuvering has passed. Desperate times call for desperate measures, and I have invited Police Chief Undyne to explain just how desperate these times are.
Seemingly from nowhere, Undyne appeared on stage with a tripod-mounted poster board and launched into her own speech. I'm Police Chief Undyne! In the last week alone, 1 homicide has been committed in Hometown. Compared to the previous year, this is an increase of infinity%. Why is there a tab there? She jabbed a pointer towards some pie charts on the poster board so emphatically that it pierced the cardboard and became stuck. Extrapolating this data to next month, we can expect at least 4 people in this room to have been brutally murdered. Within a year, there will be no survivors. According to these projections, she squinted at the teleprompter, by quintupling the budget for our Boys in Blue, we can reduce that time frame down to just 6 months. Azor quickly snatched the mic back from Undyne.
What the police chief was saying, he continued, is that the spike in violent crime is doubtless driven by human drug cartels trafficking product through our town. There is no explanation for the appearance of an opiate-covered human corpse in a community of monsters. This drug trafficking conspiracy also likely lies at the root of the opium crisis that has crippled our town for years. But now it is clear that these animals are not merely content to take from us the well-being of our youth. They now threaten our way of life, every man, woman, and, he faltered, Hochi Mama, with direct violence. And in the face of such a depraved assault, we are left with but one option.
Change it to but one, it sounds more badass. A scrabbling noise from above. The crowd collectively craned their necks upward to see Spamton clinging to the wall over the stage and struggling to untie a rope around a large bundled curtain. He eventually gave up and simply speared the knot with his 2/3 Tom Cruise long nose, unfurling an enormous poster depicting an aerial view of hometown surrounded by a ring of concrete walls, which appeared to bisect the Holiday Mansion. A bold-lettered slogan hung above the image.
A vote for the barrier is a vote for freedom.
Halloween could no longer hide her incredulity. Oh wait, chat wants to know if Spamton is Spamton A Spamton? No, it's Spamton X Spamton. Who is a Spamton who is reincarnated as a Lightner with the soul from a chicken egg. Where would you put this fanfic on the D&D personality chart? Fuck, the D&D personality chart ain't big enough to contain Electiontruckung. Halloween could no longer hide her incredulity. You want to build a wall, she asked, not seeming to believe the words coming out of her own beak. Asgore turned to her stoically.
Yes.
Halloween's quills bristled. Footnote 9. They did be bouncing. Build it how, Asgore? She nearly shouted. Who will build it? Who will pay for it? Do you expect anyone in this room to believe you can coordinate rebuilding our entire town into a military enclave when you haven't been able to stack enough brain cells end to end to pay your rent for the last 8 months? She turned to address the crowd and gestured an antenna toward Asgore. Have you all forgotten who this man is? He's wearing a new suit, he's reading lines for some sleazeball in glasses, but that's still Asgore Dreamer. He can't hold a job. By rights, he shouldn't even be able to hold on to his own shop. And you're expecting him to fight a war for you. Murmuring from the crowd. From somewhere in the back, Toriel called out, He always leaves the toilet seat up, too. Asgore's face betrayed no emotion. As the noise began to settle, he turned to Halloween.
And whose fault is it that I cannot afford to pay rent?
He said softly. Silence fell. Halloween quickly snapped back. Your own fault, obviously.
So easy for you to say, Halloween, Asgore replied gravely. You, the richest person in hometown. You, the landlord who can sit back and leech off the wealth of the less fortunate. Not so easy.
He attempted to slam his podium for emphasis, but since it was already destroyed, his fist just awkwardly bobbed in midair.
For the working class who keep this community afloat, he finished intrepidly. You ask who will pay for the barrier, Mayor? Why not yourself?
He pivoted theatrically toward the crowd.
If I am voted mayor, he thundered, I will build the barrier, and I will make the holidays pay for it. In conjunction with our generous sponsors, Raid Shadow Crystals, Morb VPN, Raycon, Established Titles, Xylem Studios, Manscaped, Keeps Hair Loss Solutions, Sands, Mike Ditka's Big Shot Soda, and the Republic of Honduras.
The crowd erupted in thunderous, if somewhat confused applause. They were cut off, however, by a screech of feedback as Halloween tore the mic off her podium and advanced menacingly toward Asgore. Every single one of her eyes was visibly twitching. The music went away. Come back. So that's how we're gonna play? She snarled. Okay. Okay, Asgore. You go ahead and tell the town about how you're going to fuck me out of my money, while I tell them about how you fucked my husband. The crowd gasped. Asgore's face went ashen. His eyes darted to and from Spamton's teleprompter in desperation. It's good music. I'm gonna turn this up.
You are open to fracking our lake, but not me fracking your husband, he shot back.
It seemed he didn't quite understand what he was saying until it left his mouth, because he immediately winced. The crowd, however, went ballistic. Monster Kid and Snowdrake could be heard chanting, Go off, King! Spamton, still clinging to the ceiling, hastily made note of the latent monarchist sentiment among hometown youth. Toriel rose from her seat quickly enough to knock over her chair and began struggling her way toward the stage. Nerdly flailed helplessly from his battle station in the back row, begging Halloween to get back on script, but she was too far gone. Make all the puns you want, she barked. Sans already has that demographic locked down. But when you're done, why don't you explain to our fine townsfolk how you can be faithful to their interests when you couldn't stay faithful to your own wife? Gaster suddenly sprinted through the back doors and shouted, "Adultery sucks, yo!" before looping back around the crowd and leaving the way he came in. Asgore squared off against the mayor's encroaching bulk.
Well then, he said darkly, if honesty is to be the theme of today's debate, why don't you explain how I lost my job as police chief? Was it misconduct? Incompetence? Any justifiable reason whatsoever?
It was misconduct, all right, Calloween shouted. Misconduct toward me and my family.
Your family, Asgore laughed. You mean the daughter whose name you can't be bothered to remember? The husband you're too busy to visit in the hospital? No, I did your family no greater disservice than you have, Calloween. As a matter of fact, I would say that I serviced your husband right well.
The crowd's uproar became deafening. Toriel, who was currently being restrained by Undyne, finally knocked her unconscious with a headbutt and clambered onto the stage. Napstablik made an attempt to stop her, but was walked through without resistance and had their hat knocked off. Toriel proceeded to tackle Mayor Holiday to the ground. The two of them rolled to and fro, Toriel punching at Calloween's exposed mucous membranes, while the mayor tried to choke her out with tentacles.
Get your appendages off my wife,
Asgore shouted, before realizing his mistake, panicking and eventually slinking off the stage in embarrassment. From the distance, he heard Snowdrake shout, I think you mean Egg's wife, Asgore, because you're her ex-husband and, eggs exist, I guess." Briefly managing to pry Toriel away from her, the mayor shouted to the back of the room, "Nerdly, stop being useless and come get this farm animal off me." Nerdly, however, began to scream crying and spiked his headset into the floor. "What the fuck did you just fucking say about me, you little bitch?" he screamed. "I'll have you know I graduated top of my class in the Navy SEALs, and that I've been involved in numerous secret raids on the Frogget Mafia, and I have over 300 confirmed kills. I am trained in guerrilla warfare, and I am the top sniper in the entire U.S. Armed Forces. You are nothing to me but just another target. I will wipe you the fuck out with precision the likes of which has never been seen before on this earth. Mark my fucking—"
No, I'm Sans Face too.
Every living being in the room immediately stopped what they were doing and turned toward the back doors. Chris had appeared and was holding them ajar, while Noelle wheeled through a heavily laden wagon containing the cardboard cutout of Sans, now redecorated to feature a gold tooth, a green top hat, YOLO shades, and a WhatsApp t-shirt. It immediately began to spout mimetic dialogue.
"I'm gonna have a great time. Use your heelies to escape your feelies. Who invited the giant furry peanut? You made a mistake coming here and bothering me. Sick nasty tunes, bruh."
Noelle struggled briefly to get the wagon's wheel over the threshold before looking up at the room before her. She dropped the wagon's handle and clasped her hands over her mouth. Chris overlooked the carnage and eventually made eye contact with their mom, who was lying on the floor with her limbs being held down by the combined efforts of the hometown police force and the parent-teacher advisory. She smiled at them. They nodded.
"How cool's your grandma? That favorite VTuber of yours ain't real, buddy. I'm not rooting for you, kid. Your degenerate tendencies have gotten progressively worse over time."
Gotta turn the music back down. Faintly, from the crowd, someone could be heard asking, "Is that WhatsApp on his shirt?" Chris and Noelle exchanged a dazed look. Chris shrugged. Eventually, the two slowly backed out of the room. The wagon bumped slightly against the threshold as they left. The threshold stripped as they left, sending the Phase 2 Sans cutout tumbling to the ground where it broke in half with a heart-rending snap. Its batteries exploded a moment later, showering the crowd in a spray of thick, tangy red liquid.
There goes the grub,
It said, and was silent ever after. Chris and Noelle sat across from each other at a booth in a booth at the Denny's west of the police station. Chris sipped their chalky milk while Noelle picked at her dino nuggets. Both were reluctant to make eye contact. Another $2.99 for Mulpsode. Just counted, I donated 126 Australian dollars. That's almost as cool as 126 US dollars. Holy shit. Yeah, ridiculous sums of cash expended, as I said. Thank you so much. Alright. Chalky milk. They were reluctant to make eye contact.
We need a new plan,
Chris said. Noelle nodded glumly. "I'm sorry, Chris. I really thought Sans Phase 2 would be a hit. Everyone I asked on LiveJournal said there was a lot of shipping potential," she said. Chris shrugged away her apology. They shoveled a mass of whipped cream waffle slurry into their mouth and chewed pensively. They let their eyes scan across the sparsely populated tables, a golden evening golden evening light spilling through the diner's windows and casting the other patrons in silhouette. Footnote 10. Translator's note. Silhouette is English for humorous. A giant monochrome eyeball sitting in the far corner briefly made eye contact before glancing awkwardly away, embarrassed by his own prejudice. Ever since Asgore's speech earlier that day, Chris had noticed more and more monsters giving them a similar look. They absentmindedly fished out their pocket knife and twirled it between their fingers like an anime protagonist. Noelle looked visibly uncomfortable. Chris, I think they'll kick us out of the Denny's if they see your knife. The knife abruptly halted its circuit through Chris's fingers, but Noelle instead found her eyes drawn upward toward the slasher grin spreading across the human's face.
I thought of a new plan,
they said. What? Noelle stammered. But Chris, the cutout broke. The whole town is polarized. The only way Sans could win now would be to create votes out of thin air. Chris continued to smile and flicked open the knife. Noelle jumped slightly despite herself. Without further explanation, Chris slowly lifted the blade across the table and held it delicately over Noelle's nuggies. Chris? She squeaked. Suddenly, with the precision of a surgeon, footnote 11, who was also an anime protagonist, Chris thrust the knife downward and embedded its very tip into the crispy shell of a dino nugget. As they withdrew the blade, a minuscule trickle of inky black smoke leaked from the incision. Noelle's eyes widened. How did you do that? She whispered. Chris shrugged.
I saw it on X.
Halloween Holiday sat slumped in her living room couch, staring blearily-eyed at her laptop. One of her tentacles was coiled loosely around a decanter of Shiva. With a flick of her wingtip, she slammed the monitor closed in disgust. I'm having trouble reading here. It's been a long stream. The projections were a toss-up. Nothing left to do but wait for tomorrow. On the floor beside her, Nerdly sat hugging his legs to his chest and weeping uncontrollably. He couldn't believe it. His life's work, the dream of downtime revitalization and upzoning funded by an increase in sales tax, was over. I'm sorry, Mommy, he whispered. Halloween's neck extended across the room and stared deeply into his eyes. Nerdly, she mumbled. You're like the daughter I never had. She then kissed him on the forehead. Quick, Heisenberg! Mr. White, there's still time for an interview. I knew Joe Rogan in kindergarten. We can fix this. Asgore pinched the bridge of his nose, trying to tune out the screaming homunculus sitting across from him and focus on the newspaper crossword puzzle he'd started that morning. They were sitting in a booth at the other Denny's, across the street from the one west of the police station.
Spaddington, we have been over this. I just don't see the cause for concern here.
I know this circus, Nose Nuzzle Chap 98. You need to U-haul your ass in front of a camera now and make sure the powers that be understand that you're not gay.
But Asgore looked confused. I've been dating nothing but men since my divorce.
Allegedly! Asgore sighed and went back to filling in his crossword. So Chris, is there a certain one you need for the plan? Noelle's neck was beginning to cramp from looking over Chris's shoulder as they rifled through drawer after drawer of rainbow anodized balisong knives stuffed under their bed. Several in a previous collection were proudly labeled as scandium alloy. A two-pronged karambit flashed by with moisture engraved in the handle for some reason. Noelle giggled awkwardly. Why does that one say?
Middle name,
Chris grunted, completely wrapped in their search. Finally, after it seemed every nook and cranny was exhausted, their hands snapped around the handle of one specimen like a bear trap. I'll say a particular, it's better. They withdrew a translucent, yellowish kitchen knife that emitted a faint scent of lime jello. Hey, did you watch that tutorial from Untranslatable Japanese Idiom 2? Noelle said with sudden enthusiasm. I've been a subscriber for years now. I think he peaked with the smoke knife, though. Chris nodded. Why that one, though? Noelle asked. Chris stood up abruptly and began walking to the bedroom door.
Sentimental value,
they said. Noelle took the hint and scurried through the door after Chris, being careful not to let her hooves clop too loudly against the hardwood. Chris had assured her that Toriel would be sleeping like a rock at this hour, but she didn't want to take any chances. This plan was their last chance. The pair rounded a corner at the base of a dark stairwell. The dark stairwell. Chris glanced left and right. After a moment, they gave a nod. The coast was clear. They crept through the kitchen, past the dust-caked Skylanders figurines lining the windowsills. They came to the threshold of the living room. The TV sat dark and silent as ever, the divots from Sans and Toriel's ass cheeks still deeply imprinted into the couch. This gave Noelle a troubling mental image, and she turned back to the door, where Toriel dropped from the ceiling, impacting the ground with a thud that shook the house to its foundations, and threw up a... There we go. That shook the house to its foundations and threw up a shockwave of dust and shed hair from the carpet. Noelle immediately doubled over in an intense sneezing fit. "Greetings, have you two been having a nice sleepover?" she said in perfect deadpan. Chris said nothing. Noelle watched from the carpet through streaming eyes as they squared off against their mother. I need to post the fic while the stream is still going. It's one of the moments of all time. You don't understand, dude. Like, porting, it's not just posting it on AO3. You have to port it to AO3. Like, all of the texts, all the different fonts, all of the bolds and italics has to be turned to, like, fucking HTML from what I remembered. It's like a huge, ridiculous pain in the ass, and it'll take, like, a while. Like, I won't even do it today or probably even this week. I'll be busy. Put it that way. But eventually. Anyway. Back to it. "Go back to bed, my child," she said, voice soft and dripping with cold authority. "You will catch a cold wandering around at night."
Don't do this, Mom,
Chris said, almost too quietly to hear. "Do not be cheeky with me, Chris. I know what you intend to do. I cannot allow it."
It has to be this way,
Chris drawled, and slowly leveled their knife toward Toriel's chest. Toriel lowered her head sadly. "I know what will happen if you leave. I have heard the story time and time again. They toke, they go broke, they croak." With that, she raised her arms and became enwreathed in swirling gouts of flame. Chris and Noelle stared in silence for several seconds. The ceiling began to char. Eventually, Sans, who had been boiling water to make craft dinner in the kitchen the whole time, called out to the living room.
Sorry to interrupt, Tori. What did you just say?
Toriel deactivated the pillar of flame. "What do you mean?" she called back.
The, smoke token croak thing. Literally, what even was that?
Toriel looked sheepish.
"It is from your brother's sermon yesterday. I thought it was a powerful encapsulation of the vicious cycle of addiction, is it not?"
Sans audibly facepalmed from the other room.
That's really cringe, Mom,
Chris said. Noelle, having recovered from the allergenic fit, chimed in from the floor.
"We're not actually going to buy drugs, Miss Dreamer, if that was the issue."
All aggression instantly drained from Toriel's posture.
Oh, I see," she stammered. I did not realize you were not going to smoke heroin in the woods. I suppose in that case it would not be such a big problem."
Yeah, Chris said. We were just going to rig the election so Sans wins.
All right then, said Toriel, beaming. "Have fun. Please try to do a better job than I did back during Watergate." Yeah, thanks, squeaked Noelle as she peeled herself off the carpet and followed Chris through the front door. "Would you like a Claritin before you go?" Toriel asked. I'm fine, thanks, Noelle said, and scurried across the threshold. Chris slammed the door behind them.
Close call, they said. The pair turned to walk down the driveway, where Sans dropped from the sky, landing with a thud that sprayed craft dinner in a wide arc from the pot still clutched in his hand.
Hey, Chris.
His eyes flashed toward Noelle.
And, Freezer Girl. Nice to meet you, yada yada. Did you just say something about making me win the election?
Did you teleport? Chris asked.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we're gonna rig the election. Huh. To tell you the truth, I was kinda hoping I misheard you there, cause, in that case, we're gonna have a problem.
Megalovania from Undertale started playing from Sans' pocket.
Oh shit, ringtone, sorry.
He fumbled with his phone until the music stopped.
As I was saying, you know me, Chris. I have my shop, I watch TV with your mom, I get home every day at 8 PM at the latest. I don't smoke, but I occasionally huff glue. I just want a quiet life, really. I know we don't always get along, but you can respect that, right? Quoting anime won't make you my dad, Sans, Chris said. Wow, that's rough.
The three stood in weird silence for a moment. Eventually, something seemed to dawn on Sans.
Okay, Chris. Can you make me a promise? If I let you win me the election and stop your, other dad from leading the town into a dystopian regime of self-perpetuating racial violence, then can I be your dad?
Chris stood unmoving for a long while. Finally, they spoke.
You'll be dead at where you stand.
Hey, nice Undertale reference.
Yeah, my brother made that game.
Sans, unsure how to respond, looked back to Noelle, who snapped out of her T-pose a few frames after entering his field of view. She smiled helplessly.
If it makes you feel any better, Mr.
Deltarune.
Yeah. Well, you can always appoint a vice mayor and resign after one day of work. That's what my mom used to do when she wanted to go, wanted to Sherm off to go on wine tours.
Yeah, sounds good actually. Alright, see you guys. He walked back inside, and Chris and Noel immediately heard Toriel yelling at him for leaving the stove on. Oh, it's a capital D? True. Good catch. Good catch. Alright. That was the scene that never ended there. Election day. Napstablook drifted down the hometown sidewalk in the mid-morning light.
In the mid-morning light with the fire in our hearts, we had something that fallen lands with the...
I forget. Sorry about that. In a last-ditch effort to decrease the voter turnout, Mayor Holiday had designated the abandoned fallout bunker at the edge of town as the single valid voting location. Napstablook sighed. On one hand, the move struck them as a blatant misuse of authority to subvert the very foundations of the democratic process that had elevated her to power in the first place. But on the other hand, they didn't have hands, so they guessed they might as well vote anyway. The dew clung to their dangling ectoplasmic ghost fringes as they floated down the path into the woods. The road wasn't even paved, and they noted the lack of wet floor signs as a potential health and safety hazard. Unfortunately, they weren't on duty that day, and so were helpless to do anything about it. Yes, I will play Spring in My Step while reading the descriptions. At last, they reached the double doors, now propped open for the first time in decades, flaking with thick sheets of rust. It was very, very dark inside, probably yet another ploy to discourage voters from altering the status quo. Napstablook tried to shrug, but lacked shoulders, and so instead simply drifted through into the space beyond, and fell for several minutes before landing harmlessly atop a heap of moaning bodies. Looking around, they spotted what looked like many of hometown's residents, but wearing some sort of outlandish cosplay. Hang on, Mr. Bussy. We played about a third of the 1 hour long Spring on My Step video, by the way. That's fucked up. I'm sorry for that, chat. Alright. Alphys was in a grey body paint and had 2 reddish horns curling from her head. Jerry was Jeff from the popular Japanese role-playing game Mother 2. The funny cowboy hat mouse thing from QC's was Gangster SpongeBob. The three Froggets were wearing fedoras and holding Tommy guns, which Napstablook thought was probably against the law. The warrior was an anthropomorphic floating pizza. This is foreshadowing, by the way. Napstablook eventually guns all of them down in the street. Pizza Pants had become an identical version of himself, wearing a McDonald's uniform. Nerdly had become Des Holiday. He had also, in an unrelated turn of events, changed his legal name to December earlier that day. Gaster was Jesus Radiation Christ. Alvin had become Oberon Smog and was attempting to hide behind any nearby ballot boxes before anyone saw him. Undone was a pile of smoldering ashes. Toriel, standing over the pile of ashes, visibly distraught, and wearing a large purple muumuu with the Delta rune stitched onto the front. QC was a monochromatic human wearing a pinstripe baseball jersey and a cap. Temmie had become Special Enemy Temmie, wearing full medieval armor and holding a diploma for a bachelor's degree in environmental science. Rudy was in ninja costume and was cured of leukemia. You missed this entire segment and you're mad? Don't be mad, this sucked. Runzel was a lanky skeleton wearing some sort of plastic armor and red spandex tights. Monster MK Kid, who could not legally vote, was Miles Tails Prower from the hit webcomic Tails Gets Trolled. Their cousin was a garish pink-black robot with white face paint and distractingly long legs. Their cousin, Grumpy, had become an anime cat girl for some reason. Caddy, who could not legally vote, was nonetheless there, and had become a human with long ebony black hair and purple streaks and red tips that reached her mid-back and icy blue eyes like limpid tears, and a lot of people told her she looked like Amy Lee. Jockington, who could not legally vote, was nonetheless there, and in a 20-foot-tall mech suit. Halloween Holiday was some sort of anthropomorphic reindeer who looked faintly like Margaret Thatcher. Cut the music. Oh! Okay, that was good. I have to continue the bit. I made an inconsistent a bit error here. Okay. We're out. Napstablook, with some disappointment, noted that their form had remained unchanged, which probably meant they'd missed a memo. Aside from that, the voting facility appeared to have been transported into an undulating purplish void, the only ground beneath them a plain of smooth grey rock stretching out into the misty distance. Far on the horizon, silhouettes, footnote 12. Translator's note, the word silhouette derives from the late 18th century French politician Etienne de Silhouette, whose last name was French for humorous. The silhouettes of immense multi-eyed beasts loomed over the proceedings like celestial bodies. There were, however, still a row of ballot boxes set up, so Napstablook figured things were under control. They quickly drifted over to cast a vote before anyone could notice they weren't in costume, but quickly butted up against the back of another one of the ballot boxes that had shifted over while they weren't looking.
Hey, bub, it said brusquely. Line starts here.
An extremely muscular arm rose out of the box and gestured back at what Napstablook had taken for a long row of voting stations. Under greater scrutiny, they could see its members swaying back and forth as they waited, supported by similarly well-developed human legs.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were a ballot box. Haha, sorry.
We're ballet boxes, numbskull. Ain't you ever seen a darkner before? Ballot boxes is down there at the end.
Oh, Napstablook groaned forlornly. Maybe they didn't believe in democracy strongly enough to vote today after all.
Actually, that's okay. I didn't want to vote anyway.
Don't bother, the ballot box grumbled. It's looking like a sand sweep. Lucky for us that kid dropped in earlier. Warned us about those two's anti-Darkner agenda. Asymmetric taxes, workplace discrimination, segregated bathroom, the works.
Well, never mind. Have fun voting, I guess.
It's funnier if it's asymmetric tax policy. I don't even know if makes sense. It just sounds right. Napstablook drifted back toward the throng of sprawled cosplayers, looking for a way out. On the way back, they passed Asgore, now dressed in a flowing purple robes over burnished armor, who was loudly complaining to the mayor's secretary about his ballot being spoiled.
See here now, the candidate's name is misspelled S-A and S-Sans, clearly as day. As mayoral candidate, I pride myself in having a strong grasp on my opposition at all times. How can you suggest that I don't know how to spell the name of my own—
Sucks to be him, Napstablook thought, and hovered past without making eye contact. This was easy, since the secretary did not have eyes. They did wonder briefly why Asgore was carrying a Samsung smart toaster with one Spamton nose-length knife stuck through it under his arm, but it wasn't— Oh my god, okay, that sentence has to be gone over, I think. They did briefly wonder why Asgore was carrying a Samsung smart toaster with a one Spamton nose-long knife stuck through it under his arm, but wasn't remotely tempted to ask. After looking around for a while, they couldn't see any exit sign in sight, and so opted to go with their standard tactic of levitating slowly upward until they escaped the current social impasse. Surprisingly, this worked, and they popped back out of the void in front of the bunker doors. They then went back home and watched Storage Wars. The following week, Asgore sat on the lake shore with his feet in the water and stared into the steely depths. Sans had won the election by a landslide after the revelation of an entire heretofore unknown voting populace that still somehow turned out to count as citizens of hometown under Vermont law. Spamton, having immediately jumped ship to work as Sans' vice mayor after the events of the election day, had been summarily reassigned to the role of assistant janitor in Sans' convenience store. He manned the till there most days while Sans filed paperwork and meticulously forgot to ever email Asgore eviction notices. Is this on AO3?
Not yet.
One day, Halloween had, within 3 days of losing her position as mayor, Halloween, within 3 days of losing her position as mayor, was elected MP of Montreal, where she represented the Bloc Québécois party. Footnote 13. Vermont having been annexed by Quebec shortly following its schism from Canada in the 1990X Stanley Cup riots. Yes. She forgot to buy enough plane tickets for both Noelle and Des before leaving, forcing Noelle to move in with her father at the hospital. The following collapse of Honduras, catalyzed by Asgore's electoral failure, Following the collapse of Honduras, catalyzed by Asgore's electoral failure, the fledgling communist regime drafted Gaster as their official state rapper, which was cool. After thinking through all these events sequentially with the best grammar he could muster, Asgore cast his eyes down to the Samsung dumb toaster in his lap, which was not in any way inhabited by the soul or consciousness of Spamton, but nonetheless held a strong metaphorical association with him in Asgore's mind. He clenched his teeth and lobbed the appliance as far as he could into the lake, where it was quickly swallowed by the slightly oil-slicked water. I'm still live. Record-breaking stream length, maybe? I went for 9 hours before. This is 9 hours currently. Asgore sat in pensive silence for a good while longer, but eventually the sky began to lose its light, and he climbed to his feet to leave. But before he could turn... Nice toaster there, buddy! Don't you know it's illegal to dump here, you hear? Asgore's pupils dilated. Around the place the toaster sunk into the lake was now protruding a semicircle of pale tentacles. They towered over the water like ghosts. Slowly, a dark shape. Footnote 14. Translator's note. It is unknown if there is any direct translation, German translation for the term dark shape, formed between them, becoming clearer as the mass approached the shore. Finally, the amorphous shape of Onion-san emerged to face Asgore. You know, Asgore, when all this started, I just wanted to protect my home, you hear? You can understand that, you hear? That's the same reason you ran for mayor, after all. Asgore's jaw hung slack. All the energy seemed to seep from his limbs. He didn't understand. It's hard, you know, living in a town where no one knows your name because you live underwater, and no one cares if your home is getting fracked by ExxonMobil because, well, they can't see it, because it's underwater, you hear? I just thought if that anyone else was in power, maybe things would be different, you hear? It wouldn't matter if they weren't good at mayoring, just as long as they weren't her, you hear? Asgore finally felt a modicum of sense return to him.
It was you, he mumbled.
On the phone? Onion-san shouted back. Yep, that was me. It's not illegal or nothing. I asked my sea lawyer, you hear?
But your voice,
Asgore stammered. Don't you recognize Microsoft Sam? Just like that one Deltarune YouTuber, you hear? No reply. I gotta say though, Asgore, one thing I didn't expect with you on the job was a dismembered human corpse landing on my head at 4 a.m., you hear? They briefly trailed off into a 1,000-yard stare before immediately recovering. But that's my fault too, you hear? That Spamton guy I met when I looked for the song at the bottom of the lake, you hear? I knew he was bad news, but I did it anyway, you hear? I guess I didn't see any other way out, you hear? I feel like there's too many you hears. There we go. I think this actually, it's better. Nah, put it back. He paused. Anyway, I guess I just thought you should know, you hear? And also, you dropped this. One last tentacle emerged from the lake, carrying with it the sodden remains of Asgore's Samsung dumb toaster. Wordlessly, the tendril unfurled and placed the toaster back into Asgore's arms. Seems like things worked out okay in the end, but you're gonna carry that weight, you hear? With that, he disappeared back into beneath the darkening waves. And from that day forward, Asgore swore to devote himself to the cause of anarcho-communism. He was tragically assassinated by the CIA 20 years later. Okay, post-credits scene. I need to get a few voice actors to do the proper reading, implying that me making noises isn't good enough. Excuse me, princess. I'm sorry, I'm not the Shadow of Roserade Umris strip club edit over here. Onion-san is a they? Did I do the wrong pronoun? Where? Oh yeah. Oops. Good catch. Later that night, in the Denny's west of the police station, the plate of dino nuggets that had been left uncleared after the restaurant's declaration of bankruptcy and immediate abandonment 3 minutes after Chris and Noelle had finished their meal finally leaked enough darkness to reach a ludonarratively significant mass. The now irrevocably soggy outer shell of the nuggies bubbled and churned as the deceased's chicken tissue was flooded with determination and/or darkness. From the churning mass of meat and breading rose a fluffy black creature wearing a green hat and robe. Who definitely didn't have any relation to Asriel. The residual soul power residing in the chicken was, apparently, enough to facilitate the being's immediate reincarnation into a lightener. The creature turned to face the camera.
I'm Rousey. We sure had a lot of fun today, but in the real world, reactionary politics, opium addiction, and voter fraud are no laughing matter.
Mater.
So I'm here to impart a very important lesson about the critical enjoyment of problematic fiction.
The window behind Rousey was suddenly shattered by a hail of gunfire, throwing him to the greasy restaurant floor. On the street outside, Constable Napstablook sustained fire from 2 carfuls of Frogget mafiosos while returning fire with their service weapon. They felt no need to die for cover, as the bullets didn't actually interact with their incorporeal body. After months pursuing dead-end lead after dead-end lead, Napstablook had finally made their big bust after witnessing 50 kilo bales of raw heroin being loaded into the back of a civilian's car directly outside the police station window. Luckily, they had looked up from their Mythbusters reruns at just the right moment to witness the deal. Several minutes later, once the dust of all 7 Froggets had scattered to the wind, Napstablook hovered toward the civilian car. Curled in the driver's seat was Pizza Pants. Over the subsequent weeks of court hearings, it was revealed that Pizza Pants, whose legal name was in fact Opioid Pants Jorg, had been the town's sole consumer of illicit drugs, all along, with the minor exception of Harold, who was medically allowed to smoke weed as a painkiller for his war injury. Having gained a 6-figure per month passive income from fortuitous early investment in Bitcoin, Opioid Pants had single-handedly funded an entire branch of the Frogget Mafia's drug trafficking operation, leaving exactly $0 left to pay rent and necessitating him working a dead-end job at the local Icy's Pizza. He was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Terry's mansion was raided days later, following statements by Asgore Dreamer to the police, but no evidence was ultimately found of wrongdoing. As it turned out, he just really respected drug dealers. Somewhere in the back of the courtroom, Birdley explained the intricacies of the legal process to Susie while occasionally attempting to grope her breasts. Bah. We did it! It's the end of the stream.
And that's politics.